Okay, so are you ready to take a deep dive into a fascinating piece of tech history? Because we got this request from a listener to dig into this vintage Bill Gates speech
Oh, yeah.
from Comdex 1994
Wow.
about the future of technology.
1994.
Yeah,
Wow, that's before the internet as we know it, really.
yeah,
Before smartphones.
totally.
I mean, even before most people had email addresses.
It's a tech time capsule.
It is fascinating to think about somebody like try to look forward from that point.
And what's so interesting is that Gates was out there painting this picture of a world driven by something he called the information superhighway.
Right.
And it just makes you wonder, like, what did people even think back then when they heard that phrase?
Well, and that's what makes this speech so fascinating to me, at least, is that, Gates speaking at kind of the peak of the PC era. Right. He wasn't just talking about like faster computers. He was talking about a fundamental shift in how we live and work and interact with the world around us.
Totally. And he jumps right into it. And he says at one point, this next era is quite different than the original PC era. It's often cast in the light of who's doing a deal with who. I think the best approach is to really look at what will it be like once it's pervasive.
And what's so remarkable about that to me is that he's almost dismissing the corporate chess game that was going on at the time.
Right.
Right. I mean, this is the guy who's leading Microsoft, and he's saying, forget the deals. Let's focus on the user experience.
Right.
Let's imagine a world where this technology is everywhere.
Yeah, it's not about Microsoft winning. It's about how this changes everything.
Exactly.
So how did he make this vision of the future relatable? Especially back then when it all just seemed so abstract.
Well, one of the things that he did so effectively in this speech is he told stories.
He did?
He would set up these little fictional scenarios to illustrate his points.
Right.
Almost like little mini movies showing how this technology would be woven into everyday life.
Right.
Which, again, I think is part of what made it so much more engaging.
Well, for sure. Way more engaging than just your average tech talk.
Absolutely.
Okay, so he lays out this vision of the year 2005.
Yeah.
And some of his predictions are eerily accurate.
Yeah.
Okay, so for instance, he describes these things called wallet PCs.
Okay.
Basically, early smartphones, right? You could carry your information, your photos, news, even make payments with them.
It's incredible, isn't it? I mean, he essentially predicted mobile computing.
Yeah.
The idea that we would have powerful computers in our pockets connected to this vast network of information. He foresaw this shift from a world where information was mostly static to one where it was dynamic and personalized.
Totally. And it's like he totally gets that we're moving to this world where like information is on demand.
He did.
It's not just about owning it anymore, you know?
Yeah, and he saw this happening not just in entertainment, but also in education and the arts, too.
Yeah, he talks about virtual museums you can like walk through from your computer.
Right.
Interactive textbooks.
Wow.
Students creating like Hollywood-level animations from their desks.
It's amazing to think how revolutionary that must have sounded back then.
Right.
But he was essentially predicting the democratization of knowledge and creativity.
Totally.
This idea that anyone anywhere could access information, learn new skills, express themselves in ways that were previously unimaginable.
It's like he saw the seeds of YouTube tutorials and online learning platforms, the whole creator economy way back then.
Exactly.
It really makes you realize how much the internet has empowered individuals.
It has.
And speaking of empowerment, he also talked about telemedicine.
He did.
Right? Doctors collaborating on diagnoses, sharing medical records instantly, even the possibility of remote surgery.
Yeah, and remember, this is 1994.
It's mind-blowing.
Right? He's talking about this at a time when most people hadn't even used email.
Right.
But he recognized the potential for technology to break down these barriers in healthcare.
Totally.
To connect patients and doctors, regardless of location. And, while some of the specific technologies he described haven't come to pass in exactly the way he envisioned them.
Right.
The core concept, using technology to enhance communication and collaboration and access to healthcare, that's more relevant than ever.
Totally. It's uncanny how much he got right.
It really is.
But it wasn't just about throwing out these predictions.
Right.
He also talked about how we were going to get there, what he called the building blocks of this digital future.
He recognized it wasn't going to be one single invention.
Right.
It was going to be this convergence of different technologies and trends.
Yeah.
For example, he talked about the need for high-speed networks, both wired and wireless.
Of course.
He knew that all this data, all this connectivity would require this massive upgrade to our digital infrastructure.
Which is something we totally take for granted now.
Oh, I know.
Can you imagine going back to dial-up speeds?
Ugh.
Waiting hours to download a single song.
I try not to think about it.
Oh my gosh.
But beyond just speed, he also understood that it was about diversity of hardware, too.
Yeah, okay.
He talks about everything from small, affordable gadgets to large, immersive displays.
Right.
Basically, he foresaw the whole spectrum from smartphones to giant flat-screen TVs.
He really did. He understood that this information superhighway needed on-ramps for everybody,
Yeah.
no matter what kind of device they were using.
Exactly.
But it wasn't just about the hardware. He kept coming back to the importance of software,
Yes, he did.
specifically the need for user-friendly software tools that anyone could use to create and share.
And I think this is such a crucial point because, Gates, as this tech visionary, he could have easily gotten lost in the weeds of hardware and infrastructure.
Yeah, for sure.
But he recognized that none of it would matter if people couldn't actually use it.
Right.
He knew that the key to widespread adoption was making technology accessible and intuitive for everyone, not just engineers and programmers.
It's so true, and that's why he put so much emphasis on what he called a social interface,
Yeah.
something personalized and easy to use. He even predicted the move away from command lines to more visual, intuitive interfaces.
He was essentially describing the evolution from something like MS-DOS to the graphical user interface we use today.
Totally.
He knew that technology needed to adapt to humans, not the other way around.
It's like he knew that to get people excited about the future, it couldn't just be functional. It had to be user-friendly, engaging, almost fun. And that's something that still rings true today, right?
Absolutely.
The most successful technologies are often the ones that are the easiest to use.
I think that's a great point.
And what's even more remarkable is that Gates, for all of his optimism,
Yeah.
wasn't naive about the potential downsides of this whole technological revolution.
Right.
He openly addressed some of the concerns and fears that people might have.
He did.
Remember, this is a time when a lot of people were still wary of computers, let alone the internet, right? And some of these issues are ones that we are still grappling with today.
Oh, absolutely. He was ahead of his time in a lot of ways. Like, take privacy, for instance.
Right.
He knew that with all this data flying around, all these devices connected, it could create all sorts of new vulnerabilities.
Yeah, it's like he anticipated the whole debate we're still having today about data collection and surveillance and all that.
Exactly. And he wasn't just saying, oh, this could be a problem. He was actively calling for safeguards,
Yeah.
both technological and in terms of policy to protect people's data.
Yeah, he really emphasized that technology itself isn't inherently good or bad. It's how we use it that matters.
Exactly. It's about making conscious choices.
Right, which is something I think we often forget in our rush to embrace the newest, shiniest gadget.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement.
Totally. But, we have to think about the implications, the potential downsides. And Gates was already talking about this back in '94.
He was, and it wasn't just privacy either. He also brought up this issue of access.
Oh, right.
Like, not everyone could afford these new technologies, he pointed out, particularly people in rural areas or underserved communities.
Right, which again is a debate that's still very much alive today.
Absolutely, the digital divide.
Yeah. How do we make sure that everyone has equal access to all the opportunities that technology provides?
It's a huge question, and there's no easy answer.
No, not at all.
Mhm.
And then there's this other almost philosophical concern he brings up too,
Okay.
the fear of change itself.
Oh, right.
He talks about how this shift to a digital world could lead to job displacement and the need for people to adapt their skills and learn new things.
Yeah, he understood that progress isn't always painless,
Yeah.
that there can be casualties along the way.
Totally. And that's something else he totally nailed right. Think about all the jobs that have been transformed or even eliminated by automation and technology.
Exactly, and it's only going to continue.
Exactly. Which is why I think his call to action to think about how we prepare for these changes and make sure everyone has the opportunity to thrive in this new world.
Yeah.
That's a call to action that resonates even more strongly today than it did back then, because the pace of change is only accelerating.
For sure. But ultimately, I think, despite these concerns, Gates's message was one of optimism.
Oh, totally.
He really believed that this information superhighway had the potential to make the world a better place.
He did, and he ends his speech with this really powerful statement, urging everyone to embrace the change, to rethink everything.
Yeah, what did he say?
He said, every company is going to have to avoid business as usual. Dozens of killer applications. The only big companies that do well are ones that are going to be entrepreneurial, break out of the boundaries, and make sure that they obsolete their own products instead of having other people come along.
He's basically saying innovate or die.
Right. But it's not just about companies, it's about all of us. We have to be willing to adapt and learn new skills and be open to new possibilities.
It's a reminder that the future isn't something that just happens to us.
Right.
It's something we create through our choices and our actions.
So true. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive into Bill Gates' 1994 vision of the future.
Yeah, that was fascinating.
It really was. And it's incredible to think how much of what he talked about has come true and how many of the concerns he raised are still so relevant today.
It makes you wonder what people will say 30 years from now, looking back at what we're saying and doing today.
Right. What will they be surprised by? What will they find quaint and outdated? That's something to think about.
It really is.
Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
Always a pleasure being here.
And to all our listeners out there, be sure to check out the full video of Gates' speech. It's definitely worth a watch, and let us know what you think. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into a fascinating piece of history.